Hello and welcome to the Facts Over Fandom show. Hey, my name is Brandon Podgorski. I am your host. I hope you are having a great week. We're about 3 weeks into the NFL season. We're going into week 4. We're about 5 weeks into the college football season, high school season across the country. Probably about halfway done. We got soccer, we got volleyball, we got everything cross country going on right now. It's a great time of the year. Leaves are changing. Temperature's getting a little bit cooler. It feels like fall is right around the corner. So it's a fun time of the year. Now, with that being said, today's topic, not necessarily a very fun topic, because we're going to be talking about fan violence. And we're going to look specifically at the NFL. And if you kind of paid attention throughout social media this week and in the sports media this week, you probably know that there was a fan that was killed at the New England Patriots game last Sunday. So they were playing the Dolphins. We had 2 fans get into a confrontation. One fan got punched in the face. Dolphins fan punched a Patriots fan in the face, and unfortunately and tragically, the Patriot fan died. He was a 30-year season ticket member. I believe his son was with him at the game. I don't know how old his son was. The guy was in his 50s, so I'm assuming his son was older and probably an adult. But just a tragic situation all around. Now, in that situation, the Massachusetts State Police said that the guy died because of medical event and not necessarily directly due to the punch. But I think, reasonable minds could probably come to the conclusion that the punch may have precipitated the actual event. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about fan violence. How often is this happening? What's causing it, and what are some possible solutions? But before we get into that, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much. Check us out. Now, in my heart of hearts, I'm a radio guy. If you're watching us on YouTube or Rumble, you could look at my face and see why. So this is my heart of hearts. This is a podcast, and you can check us out on all the podcasting platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, and Amazon. But you could also check us out on YouTube and Rumble, and be sure to give us a follow on social media. That's where I probably can communicate with you the best, on Twitter and Instagram at FOF_show. And I always want to say a thank you to our sponsor, Crossroads Shirts. Visit crossroadsshirts.etsy.com. Use the promo code FOF10, FOF10. You're going to get 10% off your order at Crossroads Shirts. Crossroads Shirts, their motto is shirts you wish your school sold. They've got the Indiana collection, the Ohio collection, the Michigan collection, the Iowa collection just came online. And I had a little birdie told me that the next state, we're going to be going down south to SEC country. So keep an eye out for that. You can check out Crossroads Shirts on Facebook and Instagram at Crossroads Shirts. Go to the website, crossroadsshirts.etsy.com, promo code FOF10, get 10% off your order. I've got a hoodie. I've got a t-shirt from Crossroads Shirts. They are soft. They are comfortable. They fit pretty true to size. And if you're a bigger guy, maybe go up a size in the hoodie. I'll probably get a double X just because I'm tall next time. But they're so soft and comfortable. I'm actually I hate winter, but I am looking forward to the seasons changing just so I can wear my Crossroads Shirts, my Indiana hoodie, my IU hoodie. I'm looking forward to wearing that. So crossroadsshirts.etsy.com, promo code FOF10 for 10% off your order. So let's jump into our topic today, and let's talk about fan violence in the NFL, and did a lot of research on this. So I'm going to try to keep this all within, about 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes at most, just because there's so much to go over. So, if you think about sporting events here in the United States, by and large, they're pretty safe to go to. I have been to, I mean, probably, I'm not an exaggeration, hundreds and hundreds of sporting events in my lifetime. I'm in my mid 40s now. And I've seen a few things, but for the most part, I think the vast majority of sporting events I've been to have been safe, and that includes NFL games. I think the most I've seen at NFL games, it's just drunk fans, and maybe some verbal abuse. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head where I've ever seen anybody get violent at an NFL game. But I did want to go over some numbers and then talk about some of the causes related to this. And then, like I said, we'll kind of get into some of the solutions. So I'm doing a little bit of research for the show, and a website called the Sportsbook Review, they did a survey of 3,200 football fans. Now, they just did this survey. It was an online survey. The survey was not scientific from what I can tell. It hasn't gone through the peer review stages. So, if you've listened to me, you know that I'm a professor in my full-time job. So when I use research in class, or I'm using research to possibly publish articles, it has to go through the scientific process. I do not believe that this survey went through that type of process, and it's relying on self-reports from NFL fans. But I did think these numbers, because they were current, they're probably reflective, maybe not 100% accurate, but probably reflective of what's going on in the NFL with fan violence. So I want to share some of these with you. 39.2% of everybody who responded of NFL fans have witnessed a crime at or around an NFL stadium. Now, around is doing a lot of work there. It's one thing if you see a crime there at the stadium, and maybe we can attribute that to fan violence. But if you're seeing something around the stadium, was that a 1 mile radius? Is it a 3 mile radius? Is it 100 yards from the stadium? What does that mean? But we're just going to kind of take this as being right in the proximity of the stadium. Almost 40% of fans have witnessed a crime in or around the stadium. The most common crimes that people said that they've witnessed include physical violence, public intoxication, and disorderly conduct. Now, additionally with that, 7.2% of NFL fans have been victim of a crime in or around an NFL stadium. The most common being verbal harassment, physical violence, and sexual harassment that these fans have encountered. So if we extrapolate that, right, again, I not going through the scientific process, I can't say that these numbers are accurate, but let's just take them for what they are, okay? And as maybe some type of representative sample of NFL fans, because over 3,200 people did this survey. Last season, 2022, there were over 18.8 million fans that were in attendance at an NFL game. So if 7.2% of these fans were personally victimized by a crime in or around an NFL stadium, that's 1.3 million fans. We're not talking about a small number here of just like a few dozen people who were affected. 1.3 million fans. Again, assuming this is actually reflective of what's happening. And now, this doesn't necessarily mean that it was like physical violence that we're seeing right now. But, that number really sticks out when you're talking about that amount of people. And you tend to wonder, and it was a little bit hard to kind of find trends on this, but are these instances of violence increasing, which seems to be the going theory right now? Or is it because we have the proliferation of social media and we're able to see more of these that it feels like it might be getting worse than what it is? That's probably a topic maybe, I can go in later. If I had more time, I'd dive down deeper into that. But it does feel like every Sunday, or at least every weekend, you're seeing fans getting to fight in NFL games, college games. And we're not even including what's happening on youth sports, where we see parents getting into fights or fighting officials, fighting coaches or whatever. So, it has the feeling like society is becoming more aggressive and more hostile at sporting events. So the survey then it goes an interesting route here. Then they ask gender specific questions. And so they ask questions of women and they ask questions of men. 44% of women reported that they do not feel comfortable alone at their team stadium. So take what their home team, their favorite team that they go to, maybe their season ticket holder, they're there all the time. If they're there with their spouse, ostensibly their husband, if they're there with their husband and their husband leaves to go to the bathroom, go to concession stand, almost 45% of them are saying, I don't feel comfortable. And I think this may be a little bit more maybe accurate or reflective than maybe some of the numbers of people who said they've seen or been or have experienced violence. 51.4% of men said they don't feel comfortable leaving their female partner or female family member alone at or around their team stadium as well. So if I'm teams or if I'm the NFL, that's something that is certainly troubling, where we've got 45% of women and over 51% of men who don't feel comfortable either being alone at their favorite team stadium or leaving a female alone at their favorite team stadium. Now, as a husband myself and a dad myself, I don't feel comfortable leaving my wife alone. And in a lot of situations, just because I have that burden, I guess, and I think I use burden in a very good way, but I've just got that burden to protect my family. That's just, I think it's a natural ingrained thing that a lot of men have. But, some situations are certainly different than others. If I get up to use the bathroom at a restaurant, I don't really worry all that much. But certainly at an NFL game or any big sporting event, I mean, when you got to go, you got to go. But boy, I don't feel great about it. I certainly don't feel great about it, even in places that are relatively safe. So we went to a Cubs Reds game a few weeks ago with my family, and my wife got up, I think, to go get something to eat or get something to drink. And I got up just to have our son kind of get some of the wiggles out, being 4 years old. And it was safe. I mean, we were around Red fans and I'm wearing all my Cubs gear and everybody was nice, kind of we're the Midwest, nice, right? But everybody was nice, got along with the fans around me, even the Reds fans. So there were no issues there and no reason for me to think that my wife wouldn't be safe. But again, just as a protector, and you never know what can happen. And you never know if some drunk idiot is going to say something because, my wife's hot, at least, I think so. I feel that need. I don't feel comfortable leaving her alone. So that's really kind of interesting there. Parents that were surveyed, they overwhelmingly at 77.2% said they do not feel comfortable letting their minor children visit their team stadium alone without a parent present. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily a high number or a number that should jump off the page. I mean, that's over 3 in 4 fans that would say that. But I think most parents that I know wouldn't feel comfortable leaving their minor alone in a stadium, especially where alcohol is being sold. So, I think that number is probably right on. But I did think that was interesting to kind of put out there. So we can see kind of what the problem is with the amount of fan violence that has been witnessed, the amount of fan violence that people have had happen to them, and just the sense of unease that people have being in a stadium either alone or allowing their family members to be there alone or allowing their minors to be there alone. And so now let's get into some of the causes. What are some of the theories maybe on why fan violence occurs? And I want to try to keep this more American centric. There's a lot of research out there, and some of it, has to deal with other countries, and you get a lot of hooliganism and a lot of research on hooliganism, and that's a different thing. European soccer, it's a much different culture than the United States football. So you really have to sift through a lot of stuff. Some of this can be broad, that can apply to both, not only United States, but other countries. But for the most part, I want to keep this US centric. So there's 5 things, kind of a 5 social ecological model that I found that contributes with fan violence. And we're going to go through each 5. So the causes. Number 1, there could be individual factors. So one of these things is there's an idea of reversal theory, and reversal theory is that people might react differently in a different situation than what they normally act like. So, and there's a lot of situations that go into that. So for like spectators seeking thrills, being destructive and engaging in violence can be an enjoyable experience within a protective framework in which they feel relatively safe. Like when you go to a game, especially if you've been drinking or you're around a place where there's other fans who've got your back because you're with your home team, it can feel a little safer for you to act out. And maybe you like acting out and that feels good, as opposed to your normal daily life where you would never do something like that. You wouldn't go and pick a fight if you saw somebody on the street with an opposite team jersey of yours. But when you're in that cocoon of the stadium there, it can cause people to act differently than what they normally would be, you know? So that's one. Two, some interpersonal dynamics. And there's two things that go in with this. Interaction rituals and police and crowd dynamics. So first, we're going to look at interactional rituals that spectators may be more likely to act violently if their team performs poorly and if violence is taking place between teams during the game. So your team's not winning, you're upset, that can lead to violence. All right. If teams, if there's violence during a game, we see teams start to fight on the field, on the court. All of a sudden, fans can get involved. Think back to the Malice of the Palace, 2004, Pacers and Pistons. Ben Wallace shoves Ron Artest. He was upset they were losing. Shoves up Ron Artest. Ron Artest, actually, to his credit, he does walk away. Players continue to jabber and kind of get up in each other's chest and in each other's face. These are two divisional rivals. And then what do you see? A fan throws a beer onto Ron Artest, and then all hell breaks loose from that. So that would be one of those dynamics right there. So I talked about interaction rituals and then police crowd dynamics. Failed policing and inexperienced staff, it can also create an environment that can precipitate fan violence. So an example of this was back in 1969, the Rolling Stones were playing a concert at California Alamont Speedway, and they hired the motorcycle gang Hell's Angels to run security at the concert. Well, there was an 18-year-old female concert goer who brandished a gun or who had a gun on her, and one of the Hell's Angels members came over and beat and stabbed this person to death. That would be an example of inefficient or inadequate policing. Number three could be situational factors. Right? So the size of the venue and the crowd, the relative openness or closeness of the venue, the proximity of spectators to players or officials, crowd composition, and viewing conditions, all these can factor into crowd violence. And there's two of these that are main drivers for the propensity of violence. One is the significance of the game, and then the other is the fans' perceptions of the performance of the officials. No shock. But you think about the significance of the game, rivalries, interdivisional games, games that mean more because we're in the playoffs, right? Those we see violence. There's higher rates of violence at those games than games that perceptually wise might not matter as much. So a Cubs White Sox game might have the propensity for more violence than the White Sox playing, I don't know, the Oakland A's on a Tuesday night, right? Then the second one of that, performance of game officials. Perceived poor decision or set of decisions by an official can be an igniter of an act of fan violence during or after the event, especially when the decision is seen to impact on the game outcomes. So ref makes a bad call, cost your team a game. We see an increase in fan violence because of that, or at least the chance for the increase of fan violence because of bad calls. Number four, social environment. And there's two themes in fan violent research that concern the social environment. One is team identification, and then the other one being masculinity. So team identification, it's defined as the extent in which individuals perceive themselves as fans of the team, are involved with the team, are concerned with the team's performance, and view the team as a representation of themselves. I'm part of the team. The team is part of my identity. It's part of who I am. Right. This is probably somebody who takes it way overzealously, right? Being that fan of the team. If you think possibly like the Oakland Raiders, the black hole, and how the fans just really identified with the team, and part of their self was being part of that black hole and part of that fan base, and the toughest fan base in sport. They ripped the face mask off. Was it Neil Smith of the Chiefs, I think. And I think they tried to tip over Desmond Howard's car after a loss. They were mad, and Desmond Howard didn't seem all that upset when Desmond Howard was playing with the Raiders, and they tried to tip over his car, right? That would be an example of people who identify themselves as part of the team. They're wearing shoulder pads and the Raider jerseys. They've got the face paint on, like they feel like they're part of the team. And the second part of that is masculinity. And I don't think it's any surprise to learn that males are more violent than females, even at sporting events, and particularly younger males. So you get this awful kind of concoction of potential violence when we have younger males, especially if they've been drinking alcohol at a game. And when I look at a lot of these videos, it's usually younger males getting into these fights at games. And then the last one would be social structure factors. And this one is a lot more nuanced. And I talked about hooliganism in European soccer. It's actually part of the culture. I mean, it's not a great part of the culture, but it's part of the culture there in Europe. Here in the United States, though, this could be things like maybe poor economic factors, community conflict, things that are going on kind of outside of the sporting arena that can bleed over into an actual event. So this can actually be some type of self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. So as routine violence at a sporting venue, it may continue or contribute to a negative reputation or promote the view that violence is tolerated or even expected at the location. So if you got somewhere where there's some community strife, or maybe it's an area that's fallen on hard economic times, people are already in a bad mood and they're going to these games, and there's violence coming out at these games over and over and over. And then it's just expected at that point, like you go to the game, we're going to get violent. You know, one of the things that came in that survey that I talked about earlier, one of the places that fans seen the most violence is in Philadelphia. And, you know, if you watch the movie about, was it Vince Papale? I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Mark Wahlberg was the lead character in that. But it shows that, like, these guys, you know, him and his friends, they were going through some really tough economic times. And, you know, the Eagles were their way to kind of get away from it on Sundays. And so you see areas like that, and people who are already having strife, they bring that into the stadium. It precipitates violence. Violence continues going on. And, you know, people think that the NFL stadium in Philly is one of the worst places to go just because of all the fan violence. In fact, I mean, they've got a holding cell, like a jail, in the bottom of the stadium there. And the name of the stadium escapes me right now. I mean, I know it used to be the Vet, but now it's something I don't know. It's probably Big Bank Stadium. But they've got a holding cell there in the bottom of the stadium, just because of all the violence, the fan violence they've had. And it's a way for them to kind of take those people who are causing violence and put them away and kind of segment them. So with that, and then it also should be noted, you know, I've talked about it, I've hinted at it, but alcohol has been said to be like the number one factor of fan violence in the NFL. Rivalry games, interdivisional games, later kickoffs, all those things play into it. But alcohol is kind of one of the common denominators that we see in fan violence in the NFL. So with the problem, I never like to leave things just with a problem. I always want to have a solution. I never want to be a problem without a solution type of guy. So doing some research, I mean, the solutions, we could probably do a whole show. We'd probably do a series of show on solutions. So I tried to boil them down just into 13 quick bites here for solutions for fan violence. So let me start with number one, you know, creating some more access barriers between fans and the playing surface. I think the NFL does a good job with this. Baseball, I think, does an okay job with this. You know, certainly it's a little bit more difficult in baseball to climb over a fence, but it can happen. And now you've got the netting that, you know, protects from foul balls, but it also protecting fans from going out on the field. So I think that helps. Basketball, those courtside seats are important, especially with your corporate partners. But there may be something to be said for having a little bit more protection between the fans and the court, because we've seen players and fans get into it. Just a couple of years ago, LeBron James had a couple of people kicked out of an Indiana Pacers game because they were saying some things to him. So creating some greater access between the playing surface and the fans. Reducing long lines for concessions and restrooms by providing more of these facilities. Now, I know it's expensive, and there's certainly an investment to be made to do that, but long lines can breed frustration, which can breed violence. Providing adequate and close parking, certainly. Who loves just sitting in a parking lot? Parking lots, I hate parking lots, especially busy parking lots, because it's just an accident waiting to happen. People grow impatient. People start cutting the line, and it just breeds frustration. Posting directional signs. Hey, this is where you go for this, or we walk this way, don't go this way. Posting signs on fan conduct as well. Who can you contact if there's problems going on? There's a lot of text messaging services that these teams use to report if something's going on in the stands. Creating processing and holding areas for spectators who are arrested or refuse to leave the premises, like I talked about there in Philadelphia. I think Baltimore might have one as well at the Ravens Stadium. Providing section seating to break down the crowd. So try to make a little bit smaller sections, a little bit better crowd control. I would also say, keeping keeping the fans of the teams in separate areas from each other as best as possible. Restricting alcohol sales. So in baseball, alcohol sales, I believe, stop at the 7th inning or after the 7th inning. May look at stopping them even sooner, or restricting them to a little bit, to one at a time instead of 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. If you ever get a chance, learn a little bit about 10-cent beer night and and just the complete cluster that 10-cent beer night was. I believe, what was that in Cleveland, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been back in the 70s, but that just devolved very, very, very quickly. Number 8, removing disruptive spectators. And you can use that word disruptive however you would want. Are these people who have violated a fan code of conduct by simply not supporting and jeering the team, and you're going to have a no nonsense, no tolerance policy? Or these people who are committing actual violence? That would be up to the venue manager there. Number 9, refusing interest to known troublemakers and inebriated spectators. Might be easier said than done, especially for huge venues, because you don't just have to buy tickets from the team. You can get them on the secondary market, or you can get them from scalpers. But certainly if you know that there's fans who come game after game after game after game, and you know who they are, you might be able to profile them a little bit better. 10, screening items brought into the stadium. Many places do that now. Controlling the dispersal process. So when people are leaving, trying to do it in an orderly manner instead of just kind of a free-for-all. 12, market to more family-friendly attendees. So this is kind of a theory here where if you bring people who maybe aren't as violent, so we talk about young men tend to be more violent, but trying to bring in a more family-friendly atmosphere, maybe a little bit older clientele, women, that might help to quell some possible fan violence. And the last one is to train staff to respond accordingly. Hey, these are our procedures. If something would happen, and these are the things we want to look out for, make sure if this happens, this is how you respond. Train them in de-escalation. And if we have to get to the point where we have to call people in, event security, police, make sure that we keep everybody else safe. So not an easy issue. It's easy for me to sit behind a mic and talk about it and say, here are the solutions. I don't think it's necessarily a cut and dry, easy thing to fix. But as a dad myself of a 4-year-old, I don't think I'd take him to an NFL game. And people can get mad at me about that if they want. That's fine, but it's my child, and I've been to enough NFL games to where I don't want him to see and experience some of the stuff that I've seen and experienced in an NFL game. And for the most part, it's been fine. But I've seen a lot of drunkenness, and with that, people are just shooting their mouth. Now, if people are around me cussing and yelling at the team, it does not affect me. I've been in so many locker rooms and everything in my life. I don't care. I don't even really think about it. But do I want my son hearing that stuff? No. And do I want my son possibly getting caught up in a fight between two drunk idiots? No, absolutely not. So that's going to be my Uncle Brandon advice on the next segment. Hang in there. Uncle Brandon advice coming right up.
But let me hit you with some knowledge.
All right, welcome to the Uncle Brandon advice segment. This is where I get to opine a little bit and give you a little bit of my opinion. So we talk about the Facts Over Fandom show being the intersection of sports, business, and culture. No hot takes, just expert analysis. This is where I get to give a little bit of hot take. So I only give myself just a few minutes to do this. So here we go. But my Uncle Brandon advice is just for those who want to go to games to commit violence or just can't help themselves or just over drink. I guess people who have had issues with this in the past, if that's the case, don't go. Please do the rest of us a favor and just don't go. Like if you cannot go to a game without absolutely getting hammered, don't go. Now, I mean, it's a free country. Do whatever you want. It's your money. Do whatever you want. But, you know, there's externalities to what it is that you're doing. You're affecting other people. You know, to go to an NFL game for a family of four, if you're spending $80 per ticket, and that's going to be on the low end, $80 being one of the lowest priced tickets in the league. And I think, you know, teams that don't play as well and some Midwest teams are kind of around that price point. But that's $320 just to get in the door. And we're not talking about food, and we're not talking about gas, and we're not talking about anything else that you may want to get at the game, right? So you're ruining the experience for other people. And especially if you're older, it's not cute. You know, you're young, you're still learning. You go to a game, you have a few drinks, and you pop off. I consider that kind of growing pains, and there's a maturation process. But, you know, you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and you're getting drunk and you're yelling at people and getting in fights. I mean, at some point you got to grow up. It's just not a mature adult thing to do. So that is my Uncle Brandon advice. Go to games, have fun. If you drink, you know, be responsible. And everybody's definition of responsibility is different. But when it crosses over to the point to where it affects others, it's just extraordinarily selfish. And people may only have the money to take their family once a year, and you're ruining that experience for other people. You know, likewise, if your whole self-worth and identity is wrapped up in your team, you have no control of if they win or lose. None. So I would advise you, try to find maybe a loftier ideal to wrap your life around other than, did my team win or lose? And now listen, I am as diehard of a Cub fan as you will ever meet. And when they win, I feel great. When they lose, I feel pretty crummy. But I don't let it affect my relationships. I don't let it affect my job. I don't let it affect my overall kind of just trait mood. You know, I'm generally a happy person. You know, I get grumpy when they don't win, but I don't ever let it escalate to the point where I'm going to commit violence on somebody. And that's what I'm talking about. Have some self-control. Be an adult, be mature. And that is my Uncle Brandon advice for you this week. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the show. Check us out. Like I said, Spotify, that's kind of our preferred podcasting platform. Check us out on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Instagram at FOF_show. Go check out our friends at Crossroads Shirts. Have a great weekend. We've got an interview next week, which I'm excited to tell you about. We'll talk more about it on social media. Check out our social media. Until then, love God, love each other, be a good sport. See you next week.